Right now, as you listen to this, you are actually physically shorter than you were when you woke up this morning.
It is a wild thing to think about, yeah.
It really is. Like, with every single step you took today, you've been slowly squeezing the water out of these hidden shock absorbers inside your skeleton.
Which is exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Yes, welcome to today's deep dive. We've got this massive stack of anatomical history, physiological research, and sports medicine clinical data. And our mission today is to look at our body's connectors and cushions, the cartilage and the ligaments.
Because, we spend so much time obsessing over bone density or muscle mass.
Right, everyone's always talking about lifting weights for their bones.
Exactly. But we completely take these connective tissues for granted. They just operate silently in the background. And honestly, the only time anyone really pays attention to them is the exact second they fail.
Which is usually incredibly painful.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So understanding the underlying engineering here is genuinely crucial for how you navigate your daily physical health.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our goal is to look past just the bones and muscles to the invisible biological hardware. Think of your skeletal system like an incredibly complex marionette puppet.
That's a great way to picture it.
Right. So the bones are the wooden pieces. They give you the rigid structure. And the muscles are the strings pulling on those pieces to make the puppet dance. But without the hinges holding the wood together and the padding keeping those wooden pieces from just violently smashing into each other.
The whole puppet just snaps the second you try to move it.
Exactly. It just collapses.
And in this analogy, the cartilage is your padding and the ligaments are your hinges. And before we can really dive into how and why our joints break down, which, by the way, happens to millions of people, we need to look at how these materials are built on a cellular level.
So where do we start? The hinges.
Yeah, let's start with the hinges.
Yeah.
So ligaments are these dense bands or, cords of fibrous connective tissue. And their sole purpose is to connect bone to bone.
Just bone to bone.
Right. They stabilize our joints and act as this hard physical limit on how far a joint can move in any given direction.
So they're the tether, like the restraint system keeping the bones in alignment.
Exactly.
Right.
And because they act as a restraint, they're constructed mostly of these tightly packed parallel bundles of a protein called type 1 collagen.
Okay, type 1 collagen.
Right, along with just a tiny bit of elastin, which gives them a little bit of stretch. And they're constantly being maintained by these cellular factories called fibroblasts.
Fibroblasts, got it.
Yeah, and because of this very specific, parallel fiber structure, ligaments are engineered for tensile strength.
Yep.
They are phenomenally good at resisting being pulled apart.
But they can't handle other types of stress, right?
Well, yeah, they are not built for bearing compressive weight. Like, you can't stand on them.
So they really are the body's bungee cords. They just pull taut to stop a joint from hyperextending.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But then we have the cushions, the cartilage. And that has to be a totally different recipe if it's meant to be crushed all day long.
It is. Cartilage is a flexible, semi-rigid connective tissue. And instead of fibroblasts, it relies on cells called chondrocytes.
Chondrocytes.
Right. And these chondrocytes sit inside this dense, gel-like matrix of collagen fibers and specialized molecules called proteoglycans.
Okay, proteoglycans. That sounds like a mouthful.
It is, but they're incredibly important.
Yeah.
But the defining feature of cartilage, the one thing that dictates almost everything about how it functions and why it fails, is its vascularity.
Meaning it has no blood supply.
Exactly. No blood vessels, no nerves, and no lymphatic drainage.
Wait, no blood vessels at all? Let's just pause on that for a second, because that seems like a massive biological anomaly.
It really is.
I mean, every other part of the body is just flush with blood supply, but these tissues are completely isolated.
They're entirely cut off from the circulatory system.
That is wild. And looking at our research here, it seems like mixing up the different types of this isolated tissue is a really classic anatomical student error.
It happens all the time.
So let's clear it up. Let's talk about the glass. Hyaline cartilage. Because the name literally comes from the Greek word hylos, meaning glass, right?
Right. And this is the most common type in your body. It's incredibly smooth and it reduces friction. This is the stuff you find lining the ends of your long bones at your synovial joints. So your knees, hips, shoulders.
Basically any joint that moves a lot.
Yeah. And it also structures your trachea. And what's really fascinating is it actually serves as the original template for the fetal skeleton before it ossifies, before it turns into solid bone.
So hyaline is the glassy joint liner. But, I mean, that can't be what's in my ear. Like, if I reach up right now and bend the top of my ear in half, it just snaps right back. A glassy joint liner would just shatter.
Well, that's because you're experiencing elastic cartilage there.
Ah, elastic. Makes sense.
Yeah, just as the name implies, the chondrocytes in this tissue are packed alongside dense elastin fibers. It provides that springy recoil.
Where else is that found?
You find it in your outer ear and in your epiglottis, which is the little flap in your throat that stops food from going into your lungs. It's built to just bend and bounce back perfectly every single time.
Which leaves the heavy-duty stuff, fibrocartilage.
Yeah, the toughest of the three.
Yeah.
It is packed with incredibly dense type 1 collagen, way more than the other types.
So where does the body use this one?
Basically anywhere it needs a massive heavy-duty shock absorber to resist intense compressive weight and shear forces. So we're talking about the thick intervertebral discs in your spine or the menisci in your knees.
Okay, wait, I'm looking at the cellular makeup here, and something is just not adding up for me.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if ligaments are made of tightly packed, dense type 1 collagen and fibroblasts, and then tendons, which connect muscle to bone, are made of the exact same dense collagen and fibroblasts, why are we treating them like completely different anatomical structures?
That is a great catch.
Are they not just the exact same material doing different jobs?
What's fascinating here is that you've actually hit on a major definitional gray area in human anatomy. The tissue composition between a ligament and a tendon is practically indistinguishable under a microscope.
Really? Indistinguishable.
Pretty much, yeah. The distinction we make is purely geographical and functional. It's entirely about what that fibrous cord connects.
Okay, so it's all about the anchor points.
Exactly. If it connects a bone to another bone, we call it a ligament, and its job is to keep a joint stable. If it connects a muscle to a bone, we call it a tendon, and its job is to transmit the pulling force of the muscle to move the skeleton.
It's like calling a piece of rope one thing if it's tying a boat to a dock, and a completely different name if it's hoisting a sail. But biologically, it's the exact same rope.
Yes, exactly. The body certainly doesn't care about our textbook definitions. It just cares about the mechanical load.
Which brings up a huge mechanical mystery for me.
Let's hear it.
If this glassy hyaline cartilage is essentially a biological gel with no blood supply, how does it survive decades of someone running marathons or, just walking upstairs every day?
It seems impossible, right?
Yeah. The sheer physics of it being crushed every single day should just turn it to dust.
Well, the secret is an absolute marvel of biological hydraulic engineering. Articular cartilage, that glassy hyaline cartilage in your joints, is roughly 65 to 80% water by weight.
Wait, mostly water? That sounds like a terrible material for a shock absorber. You don't build a car suspension out of water balloons.
You wouldn't know unless you could control the flow of that water perfectly.
Okay, so how does it control it?
The water in cartilage is held in place by those negatively charged molecules we mentioned earlier, the proteoglycans. Specifically, a massive molecule called aggrecan.
Aggrecan.
Right. And these molecules act like highly charged negative magnets. Because water molecules have a slight positive charge on one end, the aggrecan pulls them in and traps them through this really intense osmotic pressure.
I picture it like an incredibly dense, wet sponge. So when you stand up or walk or run, you are mechanically loading that joint. You're stepping on the sponge.
Exactly. And the water is physically squeezed out of the compressed cartilage into the surrounding joint space.
But then the moment you take the weight off, the magnetic pull of the aggrecan just sucks the water rushing back in.
Yes. It's a self-lubricating hydraulic cushion.
That is amazing.
And we can actually measure this hydraulic shifting in real time. Like, cartilage thickness measurably decreases over the course of a single day of activity.
So that goes back to the intro. You are literally a tiny bit shorter at the end of the day because you've squeezed the water out of your spinal discs and your knee cartilage.
Right. And then when you sleep and lay horizontal, taking the load off, the tissue rebounds. We actually see the extreme version of this in space.
Oh, with astronauts?
Yeah, astronauts in zero gravity or even bedridden patients show measurable cartilage swelling because the constant unloading allows the sponge to just keep pulling water in without ever being squeezed out.
That makes total sense. But there has to be a horrifying biological trade-off to this sponge mechanic.
There is, and it's a big one.
Because if you step on a wet sponge and it tears under the pressure, because of that avascularity, there is no blood supply to bring a repair crew.
And that is the tragic flaw of cartilage. Because it has no direct blood vessels, it relies entirely on the mechanical pumping action of that water to pull microscopic nutrients and oxygen through the tissue matrix from the surrounding areas.
So when hyaline cartilage tears, It doesn't bleed.
It doesn't bleed. And without a blood clot to kickstart the normal inflammatory healing cascade, it basically just sits there.
It's just completely stranded.
This single fact explains almost all clinical joint degradation. The body eventually tries to fix the tear, but because of the poor nutrient environment, it just can't manufacture that perfect, glassy hyaline cartilage again.
So what does it do?
Instead, it patches the hole with inferior, weaker fibrocartilage scar tissue.
Oh, like the heavy-duty stuff, but in the wrong place.
Exactly. Think of it like patching a super smooth asphalt highway with a pile of loose gravel. I mean, it fills the hole for a bit, but it's mechanically rougher, weaker, and it degrades much faster.
And because of that exact vulnerability, the fact that this tissue doesn't bleed or heal normally, early physicians were completely baffled by it, right?
Well, they had no idea what to make of it.
Digging into the history in our sources, it looks like doctors were working with a totally broken map of both cartilage and ligaments for a staggering amount of time.
A really staggering amount of time. So the systematic description of these tissues traces back to Galen of Pergamon, who was this prominent Greco-Roman physician living from roughly 129 to 216 CE.
Wow, so way back.
Yeah, and he coined the term ligamenta, meaning things that bind. But Galen had a massive obstacle. Human dissection was a profound religious and cultural taboo in ancient Rome.
Right, messing with a corpse was considered a desecration.
Exactly. So to understand anatomy, Galen mostly just dissected Barbary macaques and pigs.
And he just assumed a monkey's knee was built exactly the same as a human's knee.
He extrapolated everything. He assumed the ligament attachments and joint structures he found in these animals were totally identical to human anatomy.
Oh, no.
And because Galen was considered this absolute, unquestionable medical authority, those animal-based anatomical errors were copied, taught, and persisted uncorrected in Western medicine for roughly 1,300 years.
13 centuries of surgeons and doctors operating on human joints based on the anatomy of a pig. That is just mind-boggling.
It really is. It wasn't until 1543 that an anatomist named Andreas Vesalius, who was working in Padua where the cultural climate was a bit more permissive, finally published a masterwork based on actual human cadaver dissections.
Thank goodness someone finally checked the work.
Right. He methodically went through and corrected Galen's errors about joint structures and where ligaments actually attached on human bones, which effectively founded modern descriptive human anatomy.
So thank goodness for Vesalius finally fixing the map, but even knowing exactly where they are, ligaments are still incredibly vulnerable. Which takes us straight into the middle of the modern knee to the anterior cruciate ligament, the ACL.
Yes, arguably the most famous ligament in all of sports medicine.
So how do we categorize these injuries?
Well, ligament injuries, or sprains, are formally graded by severity. Grade 1 is a mild stretching where the collagen fibers stay structurally intact. Grade 2 is a partial tear with some noticeable joint laxity.
And grade 3?
Grade 3 is a complete rupture. The collagen tether is totally snapped, causing gross, massive instability in the joint.
And the scale of this is just huge. Our sources estimate 100,000 to 200,000 ACL injuries happen every single year in the U.S. alone.
It's incredibly common.
And there is a heavily researched demographic disparity here, too. Female athletes show a notably higher rate of ACL tears than male athletes in comparable cutting and pivoting sports like soccer and basketball.
Yeah, researchers attribute this higher risk to a really complex matrix of factors. Anatomically, female athletes often have a narrower femoral notch.
Which is the physical space where the ACL sits.
Exactly, the bony space, meaning the ligament can get pinched more easily during awkward movements.
Makes sense. What else?
There's also the Q angle, which is the angle at which the femur meets the tibia. That's generally wider in females due to a wider pelvis.
Oh, right.
And you add in hormonal fluctuations that can affect collagen laxity and biomechanical differences in neuromuscular control, basically how the muscles fire to absorb shock when landing from a jump, and it becomes an incredibly active area of preventative training in sports medicine today.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's talk about treating that grade 3 complete rupture. Because intuitively, if a rubber band holding your knee together completely snaps, you need a surgeon to go in and tie it back together or, replace it.
Right, that's what everyone assumes.
There's no other way. But I'm looking at this landmark 2010 Swedish study from the sources, and it turns the entire surgical world upside down. Are you telling me that a completely snapped ACL might just need intense physical therapy instead of a scalpel?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, You could really see why this study, which was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, sent absolute shock waves to the orthopedic community.
I can imagine.
For decades, immediate surgical reconstruction of a torn ACL was just the unquestioned default for any active person. But this randomized trial found something genuinely surprising.
What did they find?
For many patients, a strategy of structured, intense physical rehabilitation with the option of delayed surgery only if it was absolutely needed later on produced comparable long-term outcomes to immediate surgery.
But how is that physically possible? The internal tether is literally broken in half.
It radically reshaped orthopedics by proving that we can shift the focus from structural perfection to functional stability.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Physical therapy for an ACL doesn't heal the broken ligament. The ligament stays broken. Instead, it aggressively trains the neuromuscular system. It strengthens the hamstrings and quadriceps so profoundly that those muscles effectively take over the job of stabilizing the knee.
Wow.
Yeah, the active muscles learn to anticipate and prevent the dangerous shifting that the passive ligament used to stop.
So the body just creates a muscular workaround.
It proved we don't always have to surgically recreate the exact anatomy if the function can be fully restored through muscular adaptation.
That is just brilliant. But as we established, ligaments have some blood supply and can be bypassed. Cartilage is a totally different beast.
Oh, completely different.
It doesn't heal,
Yeah.
and you can't just train a muscle to be a shock absorber in a joint space. And that realization about cartilage led modern medicine in two totally different directions. One revolutionary scientific breakthrough and one absolute massive consumer scam.
Well, let's start with the scientific breakthrough because it required overturning a really long-standing myth.
That was the myth.
For a very long time, medical science viewed cartilage as just a passive gasket, just dead, inert filler material. But since the 1990s, deep research into a concept called mechanotransduction proved that was entirely wrong.
Mechanotransduction, that sounds incredibly dense.
It sounds dense, but it's actually a beautifully simple concept. It's the process of how a cell senses physical, mechanical force and translates it into a chemical signal.
Okay, so how does that work in the knee?
When you walk and that physical pressure squishes the cartilage, the cell membrane of the chondrocyte physically bends.
Literally bends under the weight.
Exactly, and that bending opens up microscopic ion channels, sending chemical signals directly to the cell's nucleus, telling it to manufacture more collagen and aggrecan.
Oh, wow.
The cell literally requires physical squishing to know it needs to build and repair itself. Cartilage is a living, actively adaptive tissue.
It's the ultimate use it or lose it system, and understanding that paved the way for a massive surgical leap in 1994, right?
It did. A Swedish surgeon named Mats Bridberg launched the era of modern cartilage repair with a technique called autologous chondrocyte implantation, or ACI.
Autologous meaning from the patient themselves.
Yes. For the first time in history, instead of just shaving down damaged, frayed cartilage or replacing the whole joint with metal and plastic, surgeons harvested a tiny sample of a parent's own healthy cartilage cells.
And what did they do with them?
They grew them in a laboratory for a few weeks to multiply them by the millions, and then they surgically reimplanted that living biological slurry back into the knee defect.
So going from just managing the structural damage to actively growing new tissue in a lab and putting it back, incredible. But then there is the dark side of cartilage science in the 90s.
Ah, yes.
The shark pill scam.
Yeah, the 1990s, the dietary supplement industry basically hijacked a real, legitimate biological property of cartilage and weaponized it for profit.
Okay, break this down for us.
Well, remember how we emphasized earlier that cartilage is avascular? It actively secretes chemical factors that resist the growth of blood vessels?
Right. It aggressively keeps blood vessels out so it stays clear.
Well, a researcher named Dr. William Lane wrote this hugely popular book titled Sharks Don't Get Cancer.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and the supplement industry took that premise, combined it with the fact that cartilage resists blood vessel growth, a process called anti-angiogenesis, and they created a massive consumer market for shark cartilage pills.
What was the marketing pitch?
The pitch was incredibly simple and seductive. They said, cancer tumors need a massive blood supply to grow. Shark cartilage stops blood vessels from growing. Therefore, eating shark cartilage will starve human cancer tumors of their blood supply, curing the cancer.
It's like thinking you can become fireproof by eating a fire extinguisher. It makes absolutely zero biological sense.
It makes no sense at all.
I mean, if you swallow a capsule of shark cartilage, your stomach acid and digestive enzymes are just going to break those complex proteins down into basic amino acids, long before they ever reach your bloodstream.
Exactly. The active anti-angiogenesis factors are totally destroyed during digestion.
It was a textbook, tragic failure of taking a legitimate biological property observed in a petri dish and wildly overselling it to a desperate public without a shred of clinical evidence.
Yeah. And the ultimate punchline to all of this is, sharks DO get cancer.
They do. They even get cancers that originate in their own cartilage tissue.
They absolutely do. And when the scientific community finally ran rigorous Phase 3 clinical trials on the shark cartilage supplements in the mid-2000s, tracking hundreds of patients, they found absolutely zero survival benefit for the cancer patients taking the pills.
That is just awful.
But by then, the myth and the industry had already made millions and millions off of false hope.
Which perfectly transitions us into looking at our own health decisions. Because so many of these joint tissues touch our daily consumer choices, it is absolutely vital for you listening to clear away the persistent urban legends that still surround our joints.
There are quite a few.
Let's hit the big ones. Myth number 1. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis because you are grinding the cartilage away.
Completely false. That audible popping sound is not your cartilage scraping together. It is simply dissolved gas bubbles, mostly nitrogen, rapidly collapsing in the synovial fluid that lubricates the joint capsule.
And there was actually a study on this, Rep.
Better than a study, there was a physician, Dr. Donald Unger, who proved this through an incredible decades-long self-experiment.
I love this story.
For over 60 years, he purposefully cracked the knuckles on his left hand at least twice a day, and he never cracked the knuckles on his right hand.
And the result?
After 6 decades, X-rays showed no measurable difference in arthritis rates or cartilage wear between his 2 hands.
I just love that level of petty, spiteful scientific dedication just to prove a point to probably his mother.
It's legendary.
Okay, myth number 2. If your joint hurts or is damaged, resting it completely in bed for a long time will allow the cartilage to regrow.
False and actually potentially dangerous. So this goes right back to that hydraulic sponge mechanic and mechanotransduction we talked about.
Because it needs the movement.
Exactly. Because adult articular cartilage lacks a blood supply, it relies entirely on the pumping action of movement to diffuse nutrients in and flush waste out.
So resting is the worst thing you can do.
Resting won't regrow true hyaline cartilage. If you rest completely, you deprive the tissue of that mechanical pumping action. You're essentially starving the chondrocytes.
Myth number 3. Bone spurs in a joint are just overgrown cartilage.
False again. Bone spurs, which are clinically known as osteophytes, are actually bony outgrowths. They often form at the margins of a joint as the bone's mechanical reaction to the loss of the cartilage cushion.
So it's the bone trying to help out.
Basically.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what we see in osteoarthritis. The bone tries to increase its surface area to distribute the load better. So they are a symptom adjacent to cartilage loss, but they are solid bone, not cartilage themselves.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? How should someone think about their own daily joint health, given all these myths, and the fact that there's still a massive supplement market out there pushing things like glucosamine and chondroitin pills?
This raises a really important question about how we approach aging and joint preservation overall.
Because things like osteoarthritis are so common.
Right. Osteoarthritis, which is fundamentally the progressive mechanical breakdown of that glassy articular cartilage, is one of the leading causes of disability worldwide. And that is precisely because we cannot easily force this avascular tissue to regenerate once it's gone.
And what about all those glucosamine supplements you see at the pharmacy?
They remain incredibly popular despite massive clinical trials showing mixed and honestly often negligible results for their actual structural effectiveness.
So what's the real takeaway here?
The real takeaway is that protecting your joints requires understanding how they are physically engineered. It's about maintaining muscular strength to stabilize the ligaments, optimizing your biomechanics so you distribute loads evenly, and recognizing that cartilage is a living, breathing tissue that absolutely requires consistent movement to survive.
It's an incredible paradox, isn't it? Our cartilage and ligaments are these absolute marvels of hydraulic and structural engineering.
Truly marvels.
They are the unseen forces that allow us to sprint and jump and pivot and dance. Yet they are remarkably fragile when pushed past their specific mechanical limits, all because of that one evolutionary trade-off, their total lack of a blood supply.
And that leads to a really fascinating, perhaps slightly unsettling final thought for you to consider.
No.
We talked extensively about mechanotransduction, the whole cellular use it or lose it principle.
Right.
If our cartilage literally relies on the physical, hydraulic pumping action of our movement to squeeze vital nutrients in and flush toxic waste out of the tissue matrix, what does a perfectly safe but entirely sedentary lifestyle actually do to the microscopic architecture of our joints over a lifetime?
Oh, wow. Because if you aren't squeezing the sponge.
Exactly.
Mhm.
By sitting at a desk all day, are we keeping our joints safe from impact injury? Or are we slowly, silently starving our cartilage to death by simply sitting still?
That is a chilling but profoundly important question to end on, because if you don't move the puppet, the hinges just rust. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden architecture of your body's connectors and cushions. Keep moving, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.